Repair work continues to power cables in Yuan Long. Growing uncertainty as more officials are infected by COVID ahead of July 1st ceremony. And cities' infection cases rise again as restaurant cluster continues to grow. Good evening and welcome. High voltage replacement cables are now running power after a cable bridge in Yuan Long caught fire and sparked a massive blackout in parts of the new territories on Tuesday.
But there was another brief power outage in Yuan Long last night. Sharon Tang has more.
The wreckage from the incident is still visible in Yuan Long. To stabilize electricity supply, CLP staff members have been replacing cables for the past few days. So far, the replacement of the first set of cables is complete and electricity transmission was back on at 3 a.m. The company aims to finish laying the remaining 2 sets of cables by next Tuesday at the latest. These cables laid along the rails are new high-voltage 132 kilovolts cables. But as repair work continues, this resident said these are huge cables and he will avoid getting close to them. Utility specialist King Wong said pedestrians should avoid getting close to the area, even though the cables are covered in sandbags, to prevent them from catching fire and harming passers-by. Edward Lowe, a representative from the Institution of Engineers Electrical Division, said CLP is likely to rebuild the cable bridge on the same site. Last night, residents from Yuan Long suffered yet another blackout, albeit for a short while. But experts say the power supply capacity and reliability will return to normal as cables are being reconnected. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Several senior government officials have contracted COVID-19 ahead of the 25th anniversary of the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR, including the next Chief Secretary for Administration, Eric Chan. But despite the uncertainty, some officials say the developments should not affect next week's events or the swearing in of the new administration. Christy Khan reports.
Next Friday will be the 25th Hong Kong handover anniversary, and members of the new administration are scheduled to take their oaths on that day. But the incoming Chief Secretary for Administration, Eric Chan, and Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, Eric Tsang, have been diagnosed with COVID. This means they may not be able to attend the anniversary and take the oath. Incoming Executive Council member Stanley Ng believes the duo may be allowed to be sworn in at the later date. According to Hong Kong's Oaths and Decorations Ordinance, the city's leader and top government officials may take their oaths before a representative of the Central People's Government. Although the government still hasn't revealed whether any top officials of the Central People's Government will officiate the new government's inauguration, most of the invited participants in the city already began the closed-loop arrangement. In the morning, people invited to attend the celebration next week went to undergo COVID tests. Among them were Maria Tam, the Deputy Director of the Hong Kong Committee of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, and Rita Fan, former Legislative Council President. Government officials will take their COVID tests at the designated testing station in the government's office complex. Chief Executive Carrie Lam, government officials and lawmakers arrived to get tested in the morning as well. Legislator Jeffrey Lam said he was not worried about the situation as most of the invited government officials already began self-isolation at home. Local deputy to the National People's Congress, Ip Kwok Him, speaking on a radio program today, said he believes the state leader would still deliver a speech online if he cannot attend the anniversary in person. Christy Khan, TVB News.
Chief Executive Designate John Lee will hold his first CE's question and answer session at the Legislative Council on July 6th. The session will begin at 9:30 in the morning, lasting for 30 minutes. This will be the first time that John Lee will respond to lawmakers' queries after he takes office. LegCo's council meeting will be held on the same day.
Hong Kong's COVID caseload has climbed again. Today, 1,721 new locally transmitted cases and 139 imported infections were reported.
Apart from the virus-hit seafood restaurant in Tuen Mun, authorities also flagged a senior care home outbreak that likely involves the Omicron BA.2 subvariant. Jackie Lin reports.
For the 10th consecutive day, the city reported more than 1,000 cases, and the tally just keeps edging up. The infection cluster linked to Victoria Harbour restaurant in Tuen Mun continues to grow. 7 more patrons and 3 close contacts came down with the virus. They brought the total linked cases there to 37.
We have taken 19 environmental swabs yesterday, and so far they're all tested negative. I understand that our EMSD colleagues has inspected the place this morning, so we'll observe what they have found.
There were outbreaks at 4 more senior care homes too. Alarmingly, Fu Tai Elderly Home in Tuen Mun reported 12 infections, including 1 resident who is suspected to carry the more contagious Omicron BA.2 subvariant. Meanwhile, 199 schools reported COVID cases. A class at SKH Bishop Baker Secondary School, where 3 infections were reported, will suspend face-to-face lessons for 1 week. A 49-year-old man who drove individuals to quarantine facilities is suspected to carry the BA.2 subvariant. Authorities believe he might have contracted the virus while changing into his protective gear. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
The Philippines has aborted talks with China over their joint energy exploration in the South China Sea. Philippine Foreign Secretary Teodoro Locsin says that while it's critical to reach the country's energy exploration goals, the country will not concede 1 particle of its sovereignty. In 2018, former President Rodrigo Duterte signed a memorandum with President Xi Jinping on joint efforts to develop oil and gas resources in the disputed waters. As President-elect Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is set to take office in 1 week, Locsin urged the new government to continue with the protection of the Philippines' sovereignty. The Foreign Ministry said China stands ready to work with the new Philippine government to promote negotiations on the joint development.
The death toll from a devastating earthquake in eastern Afghanistan continues to climb days after it turned brick and stone homes into rubble. More than 1,150 people are dead, with scores more injured, according to the latest figures carried from state media. International aid organizations have stepped in to assist, but they are struggling to bring in help. Poor roads leading to the affected areas were made worse by damage and rain.
In the U.S., 3 Donald Trump-era Justice Department officials testified to the House panel investigating the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. They said the former president repeatedly contacted the body's leader to pursue his false election fraud claims in the wake of his defeat to Joe Biden, despite being told that none of the allegations had any merit.
In the weeks leading to January 6th, the Department of Justice was fielding almost daily requests from the president to investigate claims of election fraud. Each claim was refuted time and time again, an effort Attorney General Barr described as whack-a-mole. When each of the president's efforts failed, he resorted to installing a new attorney general to say the election was illegal and corrupt, simply so he could stay in power.
The hearing was the 5th by the panel investigating the assault on the Capitol. Despite their testimonies, the witnesses dubbed the president's contact as an extraordinary breach of protocol. They said this is because the Justice Department has long cherished its independence from the White House and strives to avoid partisan considerations when making investigative decisions.
In relation to federal elections?
Coming up after the break, more controversy over the jumbo floating restaurant. Ukraine is one big step closer to joining the EU. Ruling by U.S. Supreme Court on gun control shocks many Americans. Welcome back to TVB News. Days after the jumbo floating restaurant reportedly sank in the South China Sea, the Marine Department announced it did not receive a written report from the vessel's shipowner until 5 days after it capsized.
One expert says that even if the wreck is salvaged, it would be extremely difficult to repair. Timothy Lee reports.
4 days after departing from Hong Kong, the famed floating restaurant entered treacherous waters near the Paracel Islands in the South China Sea. Jumbo's parent company, Aberdeen Restaurant Enterprises, said the vessel had capsized in waters that are more than 1,000 meters deep, and that a successful salvage operation is unlikely. The Marine Department said it did not receive any notices from the shipowner on the next day. 5 days after the accident, the Marine Department received a written report through the shipowner's agent detailing the bad weather that caused the capsizing. However, it did not include any updates on the state of the vessel. According to Chapter 369 of the Merchant Shipping Safety Ordinance, if a ship is involved in an accident, its captain or shipowner must hand in a report to the Marine Department no later than 24 hours after arriving in the next port. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong Seamen's Union said the Marine Department should be immediately contacted after the accident, as the captain or shipowner would have useful on-site knowledge. An engineer also noted the difficulty of restoring the original appearance of the floating restaurant. He added that sections of the vessel would be required to be stripped away to make the salvage operation easier. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
A residential building in Jordan has developed a crack in its exterior, with structural engineers reporting that the building is experiencing a slight drop in height. However, they believe this poses no immediate danger to the public. Manyun building, located at Ferry Point in Jordan, is currently held in place by support frames. The crack can be seen extending to two sides of the building. Police officers are on site to investigate. Research shows the crack formed back in 2011 and was repaired 5 years later before re-emerging in 2019. Experts have a few theories on what caused it, including overloaded floor slabs and rusted rebar in the building.
Police have arrested 5 men for allegedly cultivating cannabis, believed to be worth around $18 million. The police raided a warehouse in Yuan Long last Wednesday, seizing 258 suspected cannabis plants, as well as 7.6 kilograms of what they think is processed cannabis. Police arrested 3 men at the scene. 2 more men were later apprehended in suspected cannabis farms in Sayung Pun and Pho Tan. Investigators believe the alleged syndicate may have been operating for 8 months.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said today a decision by the European Union to put his nation on a path toward membership could make the 27-nation bloc even stronger and freer.
At a summit in Brussels yesterday, EU leaders set in motion a potentially years-long process that could draw the embattled country further away from Russia's influence and bind it more closely to the West.
Vote is closed, and it is overwhelmingly adopted.
The European Union has agreed to put Ukraine on a path toward EU membership. In a vote done with uncharacteristic speed and unity, EU members decided that both Ukraine and Moldova, which borders Ukraine, will be granted candidate status. Afterwards, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine is capable of becoming a full-fledged EU member. He added he believes the EU, together with Ukraine, will be rebuilding the country after the war. Ukrainian citizens are pleased with the decision, but some argue there's still a long way to go. This man says corruption is the main obstacle to membership. Others say the country's higher institutions are not ready for EU membership. Still, the war has lent urgency to the cause. Today, Ukraine signaled its troops are withdrawing from Severodonetsk, a move that could be a significant setback in its struggle to defeat Russian forces. The eastern city has seen some of the worst fighting of the war. The battle is key for Russia to establish control over the last remaining Ukrainian-held sliver of Luhansk province, which, along with Donetsk, makes up the Donbas region, Ukraine's industrial heartland. The fall of Severodonetsk would leave only Lysychansk, its sister city across a river, remaining in Ukrainian hands. Analysts say the Russian forces are taking heavy casualties and face problems in leadership, supplies, and morale. Nonetheless, they are grinding down Ukrainian resistance and making incremental gains in the east and south. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative Party lost both seats in 2 emergency by-elections.
Meanwhile, UK railway staff staged their second national walkout of the week. Daniel Rowell reports.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative Party suffered major blows in 2 by-elections. The Liberal Democrats overturned a big Tory majority to win the seat of Tiverton and Honiton, southwest England. Elsewhere, the main opposition Labour Party reclaimed the Northern English seat of Wakefield from the Tories. The ballots were triggered by the resignations of 2 scandal-hit Conservative members of Parliament and come with Prime Minister Boris Johnson having narrowly survived a recent no-confidence vote from within his party. Conservative Party Chairman Oliver Dowden resigned after the results were revealed. He said the party's supporters are distressed and disappointed by recent events. The Prime Minister was attending a Commonwealth summit in Rwanda when the by-election results were announced. Johnson acknowledged the results had been tough, but that he would listen to what the public are saying.
We've had some tough by-election results, and they've been, I think, a reflection of a lot of things, but we've got to recognise that voters are going through a tough time at the moment. And I think that as a government, I've got to listen to what people are saying, and in particular to the difficulties people are facing over the cost of living.
Johnson has so far resisted calls to resign despite having been fined for breaking lockdown rules at his Downing Street office. The Prime Minister still holds a large majority in the House of Commons, but analysts believe his authority within the Conservative Party could be further undermined following the by-elections. Meanwhile, UK railway staff staged their second national walkout of the week on Thursday. The 24-hour strike involving some 40,000 cleaners, signallers, maintenance workers and station staff led to the cancellation of around 4/5 of passenger services in Britain. A third walkout is planned for Saturday. The railway dispute revolves around pay, working conditions and job security as train companies aim to drive down costs in a bid to recover from pandemic-related economic damage. Daniel Rowell, TVB News.
The U.S. Supreme Court has made a ruling that appears shocking in the face of frequent gun-related violence and death across the country.
The court has struck down a New York state law saying it went too far in restricting who can get a permit to carry a gun in public. This report from NBC News.
For the first time in American history, the Supreme Court ruled that when the Second Amendment says there's a right to keep and bear arms, that means a right to carry a handgun outside the home for self-defense. The court struck down a New York law that required showing a special need beyond a general desire for self-defense to get a permit for carrying a concealed gun in public. By a vote of 6-3, the court said no other constitutional right requires showing some special need to exercise it, and that's not how the Second Amendment works. Writing for the majority, Justice Clarence Thomas said local governments can still ban guns from sensitive places, but he said that doesn't simply mean anywhere the public congregates. And Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Brett Kavanaugh said states can still impose licensing requirements, like background and mental health checks and firearms training.
The Supreme Court today said you can't require someone to justify why they want to conceal carry a gun, but it was leaving open where the state could restrict these guns and who could have them.
The decision will have an immediate impact on New York and 5 other states with similar restrictions, but in the ruling's most far-reaching language, it said a concern for public safety isn't enough to justify new gun controls. Justice Thomas said gun regulations must be, quote, consistent with this nation's historical tradition of firearms regulation.
I think this language is going to make it really difficult to justify gun laws going forward and will lead to courts striking down a wide variety of gun safety laws.
In dissent, the court's 3 liberals listed 9 recent mass shootings, including at the school in Uvalde, Texas, and the supermarket in Buffalo, New York. Justice Stephen Breyer said courts must consider the serious dangers and consequences of gun violence that lead states to regulate firearms.
Meantime, with the mainland boosting support for mobile communication technology, China Mobile announced earlier this week that it plans to make 6G available by 2030. On Tuesday, the firm released a white paper on technological developments and trends of sixth-generation mobile communication technology. 6G technology is envisioned to transmit larger amounts of data at faster speeds than prior telecom generations. Experts say the 6G network is also designed to be closely connected with other technologies, such as the metaverse. Well, happy Friday. Have a good weekend ahead.
Good night.